All right, great. So let's get started. I'll start with a quick intro, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So I'm Jessica Masters. As you just heard, I oversee the travel, telecom, financial services, and insurance verticals for Netflix advertising. I've been in the business about 2 decades now on the sales and agency sides, and the last 10 years I've really been focused on connected television across ESPN, Hulu, and Roku. And I'm so thrilled to be here today and joined by Josh Earnest. So for those of you who are not United Airlines employees or who do not know Josh, I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of your amazing career accomplishments, if you don't mind. Cool?
Sure.
Okay. Not to put you on the spot. But as Julia said, he's currently serving as Executive Vice President of Communications and Advertising here at United. He's also on the United executive team and leads a team of folks who are developing and implementing the airline's global communication strategies, advertising strategies, and community engagement strategies. So prior to this role, he brings more than 2 decades of political experience. And before joining United in May of 2018, is that correct? He was a political analyst for NBC News and MSNBC and on some of the top news programs. So amazing accomplishments. And then prior to that, he served 8 years in the Obama White House, including as press secretary from 2014 to 2017, and also working on some of the largest races across the country. Right?
Well said.
All right. I think I covered it all.
You got it all.
Okay. So let's jump in. I'd love to start by focusing on brand building and inherently innovation as a part of that. So the definition of innovation doesn't change, but what marketers look to innovation and how they implement them in their media strategies does. So can you talk about how your team is thinking about that a little bit?
Well, thank you, Jessica.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here and for having this conversation. And welcome to Willis Tower and to the United Airlines headquarters. We're excited to host you today and to give you an opportunity to enjoy our facilities and hopefully have a nice meeting today. You've asked a really important question. I'm really glad this is where you started. We're starting in a good place by talking about innovation.
Right.
And one of the reasons that I think that this is really a really important conversation, not just for the kinds of things we're doing at United, but I think probably the kinds of things that many of you are doing in the organizations where you work, is all of us in this era being asked to do more with less. And if we want to deliver more impact, we're going to have to come up with some creative ideas. We can't just keep doing the same thing. At some point, we're going to have to think of new things. I think the most powerful thing I think about innovation is for us to have a broad definition of innovation. For sometimes when people are talking about innovation, you can tell they're just using it as a shortcut for technology. And technology is often a source of innovation, but it's not the only source of innovation. In some cases, we have to force ourselves to think a little bit more clearly about how to do that. So one way in which we've actually tried to innovate at United is something that Maggie may have covered at the beginning, and it's the way that we've actually structured our team. That we have worked really, really hard to integrate the different communication elements of our team here at United. So we actually just did a meeting 45 minutes ago that we do every morning that includes our PR team, our employee communications team, alongside the leaders of our advertising and social team. And forcing those groups to work closely together has been really valuable to us. It has been the key to a lot of our success. Now, in some ways, it'd be easy for us to sit back and say, well, shouldn't we have a much larger employee communications team or a much larger advertising team or a much larger PR team? We could justify that given the size of our brand and given all the activity, given that we've got 100,000 employees all around the world, given the intense media spotlight that we're under every day, given all the incredible work that Maggie and her team are doing on advertising and social. You could justify those teams being a lot larger, but by being smaller, it is easier for them to integrate, capitalize on one another's ideas, and to learn from them and get better because we've got a front row seat to what's happening in that world. So that's one way in which we've harnessed some innovation. It has nothing to do with technology, but does have to do with the way that we think about structuring our team differently and capitalizing on those opportunities we have.
It's amazing. And I was at the media day last week, and was fascinating to hear from the whole team. And I think another piece that just stood out to me was, all about good leads the way and kind of what you're doing with Aviate Academy and sustainability. So I think that's really interesting too as you think about different pieces of the business.
Yeah, that spirit of innovation is something that we've pushed really hard to try to channel here at United. In many ways, the pandemic forced us to do that. Necessity is the mother of invention, right? And going through the pandemic was very challenging for United. We saw our business decline by 98% overnight. Just to give you an example, today more than 500,000 people will board a United Airlines flight. But it's right around this time in mid-May of 2020, there was a Sunday where fewer than 10,000 people boarded a United flight. So it was a dramatic change, and it forced us to make dramatic changes to the way that we run our business. The point of that illustration is we have been forced to change the way that we think about running the business, and we tried. The fact that we've sort of gotten up off the mat after the pandemic, that's a big relief. I don't want to suggest to you that it's not, or that the pace is somehow unchanged. It's not as stressful as it was during that period. But what we've tried to not lose is our handle on sort of that spirit of innovation and this idea of how do we respond to challenges in a way that forces us to think much more broadly and to challenge some basic assumptions about the way that you run an airline in the way that we had to do during the pandemic.
Yeah, and I mean, that goes back to another point too that I heard about, in August of 2020, you got rid of change fees, and you were the first airline to do so, and everyone else followed in really short order after that.
They did.
So yeah, it's just interesting how you made decisions in a hard time in your business, but that really ended up being better for the travelers and for the business overall.
It did. The change fees thing may seem like a small change, but at that period, I think in the third quarter of 2020, we lost more than $1 billion in that one quarter. And by making this change to forego change fees permanently, that's a $600 million decision in revenue that we were giving up, that we could not compensate for. It's not like we were raising fees in other places to compensate for that. What we were making, though, was a long-term bet that there'd be a lot of customer goodwill. Because at this point, for several months, we had been waiving change fees because everybody was changing their flights because of COVID. That was the era. We recognized that people were not going to all of a sudden be comfortable with giving up that flexibility again. So we made that change. So it's ironic that you say this, because even yesterday we did our quarterly earnings call with analysts and talked about the financial performance of the company in the first quarter. And one of the big advantages that we now cite is getting rid of change fees. That really punctured one of the key advantages that Southwest Airlines previously had over us. They had the appearance of being more customer friendly because they wouldn't charge you an extra fee to change their flight. They no longer have that claim anymore, and we do believe that it has put us in a position to much more effectively compete against Southwest as a result.
I mean, as a traveler myself, I'm sure everyone feels the same. The no change fees is a game changer when you're changing flights all the time. So I'd love to piggyback off of this, and I've had a lot of conversations in market with different partners around performance marketing versus brand marketing, and this is always kind of a debate. Has it swung too far towards performance? Does it need to come back towards brand? How are you and your team thinking about this, and kind of from a media mix standpoint between the two?
Yeah. This is one way in which my unique background, I think, gives me a different perspective, I think, than others who, frankly, know more and have spent more time in the space. But my bias, not having an extensive professional advertising background, I did some political advertising early in my career, but most of my background is in communications and PR. I think it's very artificial to distinguish between the two. If you aren't doing things from that you label performance marketing that benefit your brand, then you're missing a huge opportunity. And if you are making big investments in brand advertising without thinking about how that's going to have an impact on the actions you're asking your customers to take, then it's almost a waste of money. So I've always sort of found that delineation to be a little artificial, because I think that in order to do either of them well, you need to be able to do both.
Right, and they have to work together.
They do.
Yeah.
They do.
All right, so digging in on the branding side of things, the Believing Changes Everything campaign that aired in February during the Super Bowl was fantastic. And you all filmed a couple different spots to talk to fans in your key markets. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about the strategy behind that, kind of the successes behind that, the feedback from the market would be great. And I think we have a couple videos to show.
We do. We've got a little show and tell, so hopefully that'll make this a little more fun at the start of the morning. This is also it's probably the best example. We were just talking about this last week. This is actually probably the best example about sort of the artificial differentiation between performance marketing and brand marketing, because this works so well, it actually did both for us. But let me back up before we get there. This is the second year that United Airlines decided to try to advertise during the Super Bowl. We advertised during the 2023 Super Bowl just in the Denver media market. And we decided to replicate that play in 2024 because 2023 went so well. And what we found is that we were able to be very cost effective in making a purchase in specific media markets rather than trying to do a national buy for the Super Bowl. And that makes a lot of sense for our business, because if you think about our customers and our employees for that matter, they're clustered in a handful of markets where we have hub airports. You're sitting in Chicago, you're in one of them. Denver, Houston, LA, San Francisco, Newark, and Washington Dulles Airport. Those are our 7 hub airports. Those are the media markets where the overwhelming majority of our most important customers and our employees live. So we know that by hitting those 7 markets, we can reach a disproportionate share of our customers and employees, of our target audience. We also knew we wanted to do something that rose to the level of a Super Bowl ad, right? All of the creatives are bringing their A game for the Super Bowl, and we wanted to do the same thing, but we wanted to do it in a really intentional way. So this is the version of the ad that ran nationally, and there are a couple of things that are eye-catching about it, right? Kyle Chandler is instantly recognizable to football fans out there and people of a certain age. You know, he obviously was the star of Friday Night Lights. Coach Taylor, known for his inspirational speeches, giving football fans across America who are not watching their team play in the Super Bowl an inspirational speech about next year. And harnessing that energy is really good for us. When we position our brand as one that is ambitious and optimistic and hopeful, so it really fits nicely with us. It also was a really nice opportunity for us to promote that we got rid of change fees. Despite the fact that we made a big deal of it in August of 2020, many of our customers, and many people who are not our customers, just as importantly, are not aware of the fact that we had given up change fees. So this was a high-profile opportunity for us to let people know about that really customer-friendly policy. So this is a version of the ad that ran on social. What we did, though, I alluded to it earlier, we also bought spots in a bunch of individual markets, including many of our hub markets. And in order to drive some attention around that, we filmed some market-specific spots that changed the script just a little bit. And why don't we roll this? We're gonna roll the Chicago one, I think. So we made a direct appeal to Bears fans in Chicago. That we found that was a really good way to get people's attention. So we ran this in our hub markets, Chicago. We ran that version in our Chicago market. We had a Houston version, we had a Denver version that ran in our hub markets. We also identified a handful of other markets that either are really competitive for us. So one of them was in Kansas City, my hometown, by the way. That's not the reason we chose it. But you know, they are. It is a market where we compete pretty aggressively with both Delta and American and Southwest, for that matter. There are a handful of other markets where we have a large presence, where we're also pretty competitive, places like Baltimore and Orlando. So let's show the Kansas City version. The Kansas City version had to be a little bit different as well because, of course, much to my delight, the Chiefs were actually playing in the game. So the kind of hope that we wanted Coach Taylor to express about the Chiefs was different, right? We weren't watching other teams play. We weren't watching another teams play today. We were watching our team play in the Super Bowl. So the most important reason that works is because he was awesome. He really did a great job, and you know, Maggie was telling me about sort of a lot of the back and forth we had with him to the run up to the thing. You never really know when you're sending these celebrities exactly how engaged they're going to be. He was sending edits to the script to put it more in his own voice days before the shoot. So he was all in, and it shows. So if there's a way to screen for celebrities who are going to be all in for your brand, then I'm going to try to invent that and quit my job at United, because it really does.
I think that would take off.
I think it would. I think it would work. One other point that I want to make here is we spent a small fraction on these ads to air them of what it would cost to just run a national Super Bowl spot. But we made all of the impact that we wanted to make. We reached a large percentage of the audience that we wanted to hit. And in fact, we actually reached them more effectively than we would have if we tried to run a national spot, because we were able to make a targeted appeal by market. This is actually something that is pretty common in political advertising. We may not be attuned to it, but we're coming up on a presidential campaign. We'll try to keep the political talk to a minimum, but the really effective campaigns are going to run spots that highlight the success or the promises that appeal to Pennsylvania voters in one set of ads that'll be different than the ads that they run in Arizona or Georgia. They'll have targeted spots for each of those voters because that's the most effective way to appeal to them. So we took a page from that playbook. There are a lot of ways in which the work that we're doing that is actually much more sophisticated than was happening at political campaigns. But this was an opportunity for us to do something a little bit different and sort of take that insight from politics and apply it here, and it worked beautifully. And it didn't work just beautifully in terms of the impact of these ads. We're able to run a PR campaign around it. The social team did an incredible job of promoting this on social that really gave this legs and made this a worthwhile investment in our advertising.
So did you see bookings for the following?
So we did. So I guess that is the other punchline, right? This isn't just really good for our brand. We saw a noticeable increase in visits to the website and booking in the markets where the ad ran. And that was the real key. So it did end up driving some revenue for us.
Yeah. So switching gears a little, and you talked about this with kind of your political advertising history. You spent a lot of time in Washington. What are some of the things that you learned there that you've brought to this role? And I think it's kind of unique, right? Like not every media team reports up into communications, and it's really kind of critical for airline companies to do that. But what's something that has kind of transitioned over with you?
There are two things that come to mind. The first is, and I talked about this a little bit actually at the media day last week. Conviction. Conviction matters a ton in politics, right? The intensity of your support at a certain point becomes more important than the volume of your support. And how do we drive that same kind of passion and intensity about our brand, knowing how important that is? Now, that's one of the benefits of working in the aviation space. There are people who are passionate about aviation. One of the things that's fun about working at United is people take really seriously, really personally, their flight experience. Our CEO talks a lot about the complaints that we get are pretty intense from people. And one CEO was emailing with our CEO and observed that when he gets on a plane, it's the one time in his life that he gives up control. He sits on that plane, he hopes his bag made the flight. He doesn't know really when we're going to leave. Somebody else is going to decide when we leave and when we arrive. So giving up that control means that people have really strong personal feelings about their air travel experience. So it's not hard, if we're doing it well, to inspire that passion and conviction. The most successful politicians, even the ones that I don't vote for, are successful because they can inspire that passion and conviction in their supporters. So that's the first thing. The second thing is just how powerful advertising can be, and I'll tell a short Obama story here. Those of you in the room who are old enough to remember the 2010 elections will recall that in the 2010 midterm elections, President Obama had been in office for 2 years. We were just coming out of the Great Recession. A bunch of significant legislation did get passed in those 2 years because Democrats were in charge of the House and the Senate, and they were assigned into law by President Obama, the Democratic president. But the first election rolled around, and we got crushed. So Democrats went from having a substantial majority in the House to having a substantial minority in the House. So a big change, and President Obama was frustrated. He thought to himself, I was I ran this campaign, Hope and Change. People seem to love it. People seem to love me. The only thing that's changed is now I'm in the White House and I have the biggest megaphone in the world where I can set an agenda and I can drive an agenda, and I should be able to tell people a story about what's happening in this country and what I'm trying to do. And we've totally lost the thread. Nobody's tracking what we're doing here. Nobody's aware of what we're doing. It's all gone away. What has happened? Has my communications team like turned dumb overnight? Right? We were geniuses before, and now they can't figure it out. And somebody, in that meeting, raised their hand and said, "Well, Mr. President, there's one other thing that's changed since you came into the White House. It's not just that you have the biggest megaphone, the biggest platform. You're no longer backed by $750 million in advertising." So having that extra boost to your messaging is really important, including for the most powerful person in the world. It makes a difference in that messaging getting through. And that's a lesson that we've tried to tell here at United. We've got a big brand. We've got a big megaphone. People care about our brand. When we make announcements, people pay attention. But the real success that we've had in starting to move the needle on our brand has been through really effective marketing and advertising.
Amazing. Well, I got the 5-minute mark.
Okay.
And I would love to take a few questions from the audience if there's anyone out there.
First off, thanks for having us. My name is Sam Goldman, and I'm one of the sales reps at Samsung Ads. Curious to know, are there specific challenges that you faced unique to media and advertising in this current role that you may not have seen during your time in DC?
That's a good question. One of the things that's interesting about my perspective on all of this is that working at United is not just, when I joined United almost 6 years ago now, it wasn't just my first time working at United. It was my first time working at an airline. It's also my first corporate job. I never really worked in the corporate world. So every once in a while I'm sort of scratching my head, when things happen and I'm like, why'd that happen? Is that like a weird United thing that just happened? Is that like a weird airline thing that just happened? Or is that like a weird corporate thing that just happened? So it's hard for me to sort of assess whether the things that I didn't expect in my experience are a result of the company or the industry or just the weird world that we all operate in. And I think this is some combination of a United thing and an industry thing, which is that lesson I was just telling you about how critically important it is for us to be backed by advertising to make sure that our message gets through. It's something I think that is not well understood across the company, and I think to a certain extent that's true across the industry. It wouldn't be uncommon for somebody at United to observe, I just saw the CEO on the Today Show yesterday, and he didn't get asked about some horrible customer incident, so we must be doing great. Our message must be getting through. It must be, things must be all hunky-dory. It's good when that happens. It's good to take advantage of the platform of being on the Today Show, which we do regularly. It's good when when our CEO's national media appearances aren't sidetracked by some weird question about somebody's customer experience. But that's not the same as our brand identity really being promoted. Because as you all know, that those PR opportunities are really good for external validation, right? You're having some independent person asking you questions and hopefully, in many circumstances, giving you compliments, because a lot of those people asking questions are actually customers of ours. But it's not the same as being able to tell a bigger story about our brand, and that does require an investment in advertising. And I think in a lot of the airline industry, not everywhere, but a lot of the industry, the advertising piece is viewed as a luxury. And I think as we prove out over time, through the Super Bowl ad, through the continued enhancement of our brand, through some continued effective advertising work, we can continue to build the case, not just with the public about what our brand stands for, but also with people inside this building about how critical it is for us to make investments in the brand to ensure our long-term success so that we can get to where we want to go as a company.
NCM, what's the biggest similarity between working for the administration and working in the private sector, and what would be one thing you missed the most about that time?
Yeah. It's similar to what I said before, but I'm just going to expand on it, which is there are a lot of fun things about working in the White House. There are a lot of really hard things about working in the White House, but the fun things were it was fast-paced. I learned something every single day. I really liked the people that I worked with because we had good culture, and it felt a little like on most days, it felt like we were at the center of the universe. We would, at the end of the day, we would watch I don't know how many people watch it anymore, but like we'd watch the nightly network news. And the first 15 minutes would be a digest of what's going on around the world. And that first 15 minutes would be a digest of the things that I worked on that day. It was fun, it was invigorating, it was intellectually challenging. And the other thing about it was that even before I had a fancy job in the White House, people loved to talk to me about my job in politics. And it was always questions like, why don't the Democrats do this? Or why are the Republicans doing that? Or I have a great idea for a campaign slogan. Or why don't you just put that on a bumper sticker? I mean, it'd go on and on and on. But the truth is, that's kind of fun. I had a friend who used to say that there are three things that every guy in America thinks he could do. He can coach a football team, he can cook a steak, and he can run a winning political campaign. Well, after working here for almost 6 years, there's actually a fourth thing I would add to the list, which is run a successful global airline. Because I have exactly the same experience when I talk to people about my job now. Why don't you guys do this? Why does that other guy, why does that other airline do this? When I flew them last week, this is what they said. I'm flying you next week, what should I expect? People take it personally. And that gives us a platform. And sometimes that means small things go wrong and it's a big problem for us. I had another former colleague who used to say something crazy would happen in a Hilton hotel room and nobody would notice. The same thing happens on board an aircraft and it is international news. Totally true. But I mean this totally genuinely. That's what makes it fun. We are relevant, we are prominent, and we don't hide from it. We're willing to lean in a way that I think is also relatively new to United. It's sort of a confidence that we do want to be part of the conversation. We do. There's that old expression, right? If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. During one of the earliest announcements that we made during COVID was we decided to proactively announce that we were going to require our customers to wear masks on board aircraft. Right? That is crazy to think about how used to wearing masks we all got to, and thank goodness we're not doing that anymore. But that was a big deal at the time, right? To actually require your customers to wear masks before they can do business with you. We thought it would be a little controversial, but we knew this was going to come. It was either going to be imposed on us by the government, or we could go ahead and proactively announce it and say that we cared about safety, which we obviously do. And so we did make a decision to proactively announce that news. And again, because of our brand and our prominence, we actually made that news when I did an interview on Good Morning America from my home office to talk about requiring our customers to wear masks. It was a big moment for our industry. It was a big moment for the country. There were only a couple of companies that had made that kind of requirement, put in place that kind of requirement. It was a big deal when we did. But that really gives us an opportunity to drive other kinds of conversations that we care about. Things like diversity, equity, and inclusion, doing the right thing on those issues, doing the right thing on sustainability. Because we have a big brand, because people take personally their experience traveling on aircraft, we can drive those kinds of conversations too, because we care about them. Those things also happen to be critical to the success of our business. We burn a lot of jet fuel. And it's our highest expense. So if we can figure out some way to make investments in some other kind of fuel that's going to be a whole lot cleaner and not have the same kind of volatility associated with costs, we can do the right thing for the planet and do the right thing for our business. Same when it comes to talent. If we're going to go find the best talent in the world, are we just going to go to North Dakota State that's got a great aviation program? Or we're going to go to places like Florida A&M, where you've got an engineer down there that's probably never considered a career in aviation that could also probably be a pretty good pilot too. If there's a pilot shortage, we better go to both places. So there's an opportunity for us to do the right thing, to run a really good business, and because of our brand, people are going to notice. And having that kind of influence is what made United such an appealing place as I contemplated my sort of post-politics career. And it's what those two things have the most in common. So thanks for the great question.
On that note, we're getting
That must be our cue. Good?
Yes, thank you so
Fun.
much, Josh.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, guys.